Hello students, Mr. Young here. Welcome to Chapter 5, Lesson 3, Part 1, called A Call to Arms. So we've already had things getting a little rowdy in the colonies. They're not particularly pleased with how the situation is going. Let's get in a mood here, a mood for revolution. Imagine you're sitting at your computer just like you are right now, doing your schoolwork, or maybe watching TV, and all of a sudden you hear the British are coming. Your dad grabs his rifle from the gun safe, and maybe you do too. You drive over to Main Street in town where everyone else is gathering, and there's an armed enemy force approaching. The only thing that's going to stop them is you and your dad and your neighbors. You don't know what's going to happen. You could die today. It seems a little surreal to think about it and trying to place it in a perspective that we can understand. But that's exactly how life was for a lot of Minutemen during the Revolution and before the Revolution. That's how it was at the small town of Lexington and then Concord, which we're going to learn about today, where the American Revolution really began with a one shot heard around the world. Let's talk about it. Now, we've been learning a lot about all the tension building up in the colonies, this tension brewing between the colonists and Mother Britain and the redcoats that are occupying. There's been a whole lot of smoke, but not an actual fire yet, so to speak. Today we learn about the sparks that set the fire ablaze that is really the American Revolution. So to start off, let's talk about a meeting in Philadelphia. The very first Continental Congress met in 1774. This body of men would represent all the colonies in the fight against British oppression. Only Georgia did not send delegates for this first Continental Congress. Among those gathered were some men who would become legends, men like John Adams, Sam Adams, and George Washington. The first Congress agreed on four major things. First, they drew up a statement of grievance for Britain, basically calling on them to repeal 13 separate acts of Parliament. They called for a colony-wide boycott of all British goods. And they endorsed what was called the Suffolk Resolves, which declared the coercive or intolerable acts to be illegal. We talked about those in the last lesson, I believe. Last but not least, they told the colonies to start arming themselves and forming militias. Now, these militias, we've talked about them a little bit before, are not professional soldiers. They are normal men, farmers, tradesmen, and the like, that supply their own weapons and drilled occasionally. A lot of them drilled on Sunday after church because they were all together already, so they would just take their rifle and then after church they'd go out into the common and drill or practice. They were typically led by someone with some experience, often at this point a veteran of the French and Indian War. These militiamen, were often referred to as Minutemen for their ability to be prepared for battle at a minute's notice. Literally all they had to do, it's not like they had body armor or anything, or grenades, or they would literally just drop what they were doing, go grab their rifle and their powder and their ball, and then they're ready. Now, as instructed by the First Continental Congress, towns began preparing for war, raising militias and stockpiling weapons and ammunition. The British, specifically in what was occupied Boston, were not going to just sit idly by and let this happen. So a contingent of 700 redcoats, British regulars, left Boston on the night of April 18th, 1775, to seize and destroy a cache, or supply, of weapons and ammunition in the nearby town of Concord. Dr. Joseph Warren, who had been a protest leader, a sort of pro-revolutionary patriot, saw the British leaving and went and informed the Sons of Liberty in the city, and then the Sons sent out riders to warn the militias that the British were coming to take their stuff. So you may have heard of the Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. There's a video all about it. It's kind of funny. It's like a rap on the classic poem, The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. So Revere and two other riders, I believe, went out to go warn all the patriots out there in Concord that the British were coming to take their stuff. Two of them were actually captured. Paul Revere was captured, and one of his buddies was captured. Samuel Prescott carried word on to Concord. He didn't get captured by patrol. On the morning of April 19th, the British arrived at Lexington on their way to Concord, and lo and behold, waiting there for them in the town common, the town square, if you will, was 70 Minutemen waiting for them, just standing there waiting for them with their guns. The Minutemen were outnumbered 10 to 1, sort of a bit of a standoff. The Minutemen were about to just give way to the British when someone fired a shot. To this day, no one knows who fired this first shot, but then one shot went off, and then all the shots went off, and the British did a bayonet charge, and the Minutemen, broke like waves on the beach. So it was not really much of a battle. 8 Minutemen were killed, and the British continued on to Concord, burning what few weapons they found. Having heard that the British were coming the night before, the colonists basically hid their weapons caches where the British wouldn't find them. When the British made it just outside the town of Concord, to the North Bridge, they were met by a larger force of Minutemen, and they actually were repelled. The bridge is a natural choke point. You have to go through that bridge, which makes it easier to defend. The British had to retreat, and they had to basically run back to Boston, 20 miles, and the entire time, Minutemen, militia, were pouring in from all over the colony to basically take some pot shots at the British. So the British ran the whole way back to Boston, 20 miles getting shot at the whole time. By the end of the day, the British sustained 73 dead and 174 wounded. Pretty cool video here all about that whole Lexington and Concord ordeal. And that is the content for today. We'll do part 2 tomorrow. For today, we have another discussion post, which is ultimately opinion. And you're more or less being graded on your ability to articulate your opinion. For today's discussion, I ask you a simple question. Having watched the videos in the lesson and having read up on the early actions in what would become the American Revolution, do you think you would have joined a colonial militia? Would you have been a Minuteman or, ladies, a Minutewoman? Please tell me your answer and your reasoning. The post should be written in complete sentences and contain at least 3 sentences, please. That's what we're going with today. So basically, I do not think I would be a Minuteman, Mr. Yun, because I do not like violence. So I don't think that's something I would do. I would want to do, even if the cause was just. Something like that. Or, Mr. Yun, I love guns, and I would have totally jumped at the opportunity to have been a Minuteman because freedom. I'm like the William Wallace to the American Revolution. Anything. 3 sentences. It's an opinion, so there's no right or wrong answer. It is a forum, so be on your best behavior because everyone's going to see your answer. But all opinions welcome. Alright, that's it for today. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a good one, okay?